Comic Boom.
Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review Action Comics issue 1012. The Leviathon story continues with an issue of Action Comics that really is a slow mover. This is definitely what I would say is more of a character building issue. There is actually no action in this issue. This issue introduces us to a character in DC Comics that is relatively more on the obscure side, and that's Rose and Thorn. And Rose and Thorn is a character that basically has a split personality. Rose and Thorn. Rose being the quiet, polite, do-gooder, and the Thorn being the aggressive, violent type. And Rose and Thorn makes an appearance here. And essentially all this issue is Rose and Thorn is being recruited. It shows a recruitment of Rose and Thorn by being approached by Leviathan. Now, what Bendis is doing here, Bendis has taken an approach to the Superman which has been slowly building over the last year. It's been basically 1 year now. We're pretty much at the 1 year mark since Bendis wrote the first issue of Man of Steel, the 6-issue series. And so at some point, we got to evaluate so far what has really been accomplished here, what has been done, how has Bendis been doing. I think it's a mixed bag, but one thing that I think Bendis has finally started to get a handle of a little bit is starting to get a voice of his characters. I'm starting to get more of a handle on the voice that he's given the characters. That does not mean I agree with the voice he's given them, and it's not even to say that I agree with the direction that things are going, but I like the fact that at least because I understand what he's saying, and I basically understand his language, and so for that reason I can get into his story a little bit more. One thing that I will give Bendis props here in this Action Comics 1012 is I really actually for once there was a conversation between Lois and Clark that I actually liked. For once, Lois doesn't come across like a bitch. Insensitive, arrogant, know-it-all. Finally I'm starting to see that maybe these two actually have a healthy, functioning relationship. It's still pretty dysfunctional on multiple levels, I suppose, given the issues before, but this actually plays out like this conversation they're having here seems to be almost out of sync with the previous dialogue and representations of their relationship from Bendis himself. So it's like Bendis is, I think he's just he's just starting to maybe get a handle on them better. He did a very, very sloppy job trying to explain when an issue, I think it was 1004, a terrible issue, that beautifully drawn but terrible issue where Lois Lane was justifying her deplorable and horrendous actions and keeping secrets from Clark, and then ending with them essentially saying, well, we gotta, I don't know, I thought they'd broken up. And we're living separate and apart. Now I'm not really sure. I wish Bendis was more clear on this. Here, it's obvious that this is a really great conversation between the two of them, where basically, Clark's asking, Superman's asking her, what did you think of me when you first met me? And she doesn't answer the question until she finally does and says, well, she implies that she never really liked him all that much when she met him as Clark Kent, but she sort of grew on him. Basically, again, reinforcing the fact that Lois Lane really was a bitch when they first met. And, of course, the fact that she won't even answer a simple question, but sort of plays this long, placating game. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. It's true to her character. I think, in a sense, I think that Bendis thinks of Superman as sort of this very powerful person, but when it comes to his personal life, Superman really is someone who wears the panties in the family. Clearly, Lois Lane wears the pants in their relationship. Superman clearly gets off on, Lois Lane, sort of taking the bull by the horns, being at the forefront of the relationship, defining the relationship, defining what they do, defining where they go, defining how they'll live their lives, defining what will happen on virtually every level of their relationship. Lois is the one that defines it, and Superman seems to be the type that he sort of likes to sit back and let her take control. And I think maybe he likes that because he trusts Lois Lane. Clearly, there's a, you can criticize that, but if it works, it works. Clearly for Superman, He's someone who's always on the fly. He's always on the go. He's always doing something. He's always someone that has to be in control. He's always someone that is rescuing people. He's helping people, and he can never really relax. And I think there's a part of Superman that sort of maybe likes that Lois Lane is the take charge kind of woman that particularly takes charge with respect in their own relationship. Lois defines the terms of their relationship. Superman is just there to basically nod his head and be a good boy and occasionally have sex with her. That's just the way the relationship works. And when Superman, mark my words, when Superman puts up a little bit of resistance, that's when there's always pushback. That's when the report of Lois Lane comes out and interrogates him and, sort of rips him a new one. And of course, and things are always resolved. I mean, when you look at this relationship, it's always Superman accepting it. They really do accept each other. Superman just accepts the way Lois is, never gives her any pushback, never really, he never argues with her about the little things, And so there's actually a lesson here to probably figure out why relationships, how a relationship can work. What's the definition of a functioning relationship? One where you accept the other person for who they are. You don't tolerate them. The moment you begin to tolerate your spouse, tolerance eventually turns into contempt, and contempt destroys a relationship. If you actually don't think, anyone that tells you that you have to tolerate people, the minute you have to tolerate someone, that's the sign that sooner or later that relationship is going to go awry. Why is the world right now in a state of complete chaos right now in the world we live in? Why is there such toxic political relationships? Why is there such toxic, our culture right now is a mess? It's because people tolerate each other. Tolerance destroys people. Unless you accept them, it's going to go to pot. And this is the lesson here. Superman accepts Lois Lane. Lois Lane sort of accepts Superman, but it's really more Superman accepting Lois Lane, because Lois Lane is still kind of the control freak. And Lois Lane is the control freak in their personal relationship. Superman's he's more in control in his professional one where he's helping people. And it seems to work for him. They accept each other for who they are, and isn't that wonderful? And it is. And I think I'm beginning to get a handle. Maybe that's what, Bendis is trying to convey in the relationship. I find it interesting. I would not like Lois Lane in real life, but I mean, clearly for Superman, she floats his boat, whatever. And having said that, the rest of it is pretty good. Now, Robinson Good. Robinson Good is on the phone with Rose and Thorn. She meets with Rose and Thorn, and Robinson Good, of course, is the Red Cloud, and her powers seem to be going a little bit of awry. So even though the Red Cloud is being talked about as being the partner of Miss Leon, the head of the Invisible Mafia in Metropolis, she's also the person that went toe-to-toe with Superman and survived and even hurt Superman. And that's talked about by a couple of mafiosos at the beginning of the comic book, a Mr. Strong and his minions, talking about how, Mrs. Robinson Good or the Red Cloud had an effect on Superman in their minor battle that occurred, I believe in issue 1006 or 7. But her powers are going awry. Now, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but the fact that she can't control it, I think it hints at a future problem that Robinson Good's going to have in controlling her powers. There's also a good exchange between Robinson Good and Trish, who's the gossip columnist at the Daily Planet. There's been pictures of Lois Lane kissing Superman. And of course, since the world at large knows that Lois Lane is involved in a relationship and married to Clark Kent, and they have a son, that is causing controversy. And so, yeah, there's that. And then there's the fact that I think Lois and Clark don't actually live together. I don't think. At least I'm confused about that, because they broke up. But they didn't really break up. I'm trying to reinterpret. Guys, tell me what do you think? Help me out here. What is the current state of the relationship between Lois and Clark? Does the world at large know that Lois and Clark? Do they live together? Do Lois and Clark actually live together, or do they live separate and are just having a relationship and have a son together? What does the world at large know of the relationship between Lois and Clark? Do they think that they're married? Do they know that they have a son, or do they actually live together? I'm confused. Help me out, and clue me in, because I don't know. But Bendis is Bendis is not particularly good at being clear on this point at all. I don't know if they actually live together. Does Lois Lane, is she still occasionally living in a hotel? What's going on? Very bad, very poor organization and structure of your story, Bendis. And I've already read the first issue of Lois Lane, and even that's not even clear under Rucka what the hell is the relationship between, what's the living arrangement between Lois and Clark? Do they live in the same roof or don't they? Because in the Lois Lane series, the first issue of Lois Lane has Lois Lane in a hotel where she does her work, and so they don't. So I don't really understand exactly what the relationship is or how that works. But in any event, it's just I wish they'd be more clear on it and just spell it out. I mean, because you get this Bendis speak where the characters never just say anything. It goes on for like this Rose and Thorn conversation. Oh my God, it goes on forever and ever, but beautifully drawn. I mean, I gotta say, like the artist here, Kradansky, does a really good job of, you really get a good sense of the different personalities of Rose and Thorn. So the art is pretty darn good, and I gotta give a shout out to, well, unfortunately I can't because there isn't a page that actually has all the artists mentioned, which is, they do, but, yeah, they do. It's arts, Simone Kradansky. Really good job on the art, Mr. Kradansky. I hope to see you again in the future, man. That's really, really great art. I'm really happy with that artist. And yeah, so really it ends with Rose and Thorn telling Robinson Goode that she was approached by Leviathan and that she believes that there's an invisible mafia. So Rose and Thorn, she tells Robinson Goode of her suspicions that there's an invisible mafia because when Superman's gone, she finds herself fighting a lot of criminals, and she feels that more and more criminals are coming into Metropolis. For some reason, Superman's not noticing this because he's distracted or he's doing other things, which I find odd and surprising. And she was approached by Leviathan. So there you have it. Now, again, not a lot happens in this issue. We were just introduced to Rose and Thorn, who's approached by Leviathan. Really, that's it. But from a character standpoint, it's interesting that Bendis is taking the time to build the characters of Lois and Clark, Lois and Superman, and you're really getting into the head of how Bendis sees their relationship. It's really it's interesting, and they clearly love each other, and they have affection for each other. And there's a cute little joke here that Superman plays on her. You should just read it. It's well done. There's some good exchanges there. And so it's sweet, and overall, I think it works. I'm being a little bit hard on Bendis in terms of how he portrays Lois, because I just don't think she's particularly likable. And I think Superman does tend to let himself get walked on a little bit, but I really think Superman is a little bit of a masochist because he seems to really like when Lois treats him like garbage, and even talks down to him quite a bit. But I guess that's the way. That's their little sweet talk. That's the little verbal games that they play with each other, and those are the things that couples do. So, it is what it is. I find it somewhat comical. Guys, tell me what you think of Action Comics 1012. Also, tell me, based upon what you've read in the last issues of Superman, of Action and Superman, what is the relationship between Lois and Clark? What is the world? Are they living together or aren't they living together? Does the world at large know that Lois and Clark are even married and that they have a son? And if they are living together, where are they living? In Metropolis? They're living in Metropolis. But do they have an address? Have we been told what that address is? I mean, there's these little things that you'd think that Bendis would focus on. And if he has, hold me accountable and say, I missed this, I missed that. I'd appreciate it, because I can't read all this stuff 1,000 times over. It's crazy. In any event, guys, tell me what you think of Action Comics 1012. Follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. And until next time, Comic Boom out.